All right, so this is Antonio Knez. He is the Senior Strategy and Growth Manager at Sentient. His research I can't talk. His research interests include AI governance and incentive alignment. Prior to joining Sentient, Antonio founded an RWA tokenization startup inspired by his senior thesis at Princeton. And take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Can I screen share?
Yes. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Antonio, and today I will be. Sorry. I will be. Is this good? Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. I'll be talking about Sentient. I'm gonna try to make a case for loyal AI, for alignment, and also discuss a bunch of different threads that we have going on with the company. So Sentient at its core is a research body, a platform, and a movement, and everything we do in the service of open, loyal, and community-built AGI. And this is a very vague sort of mission statement, so I'll go deeper into each one during the presentation. Our goal and sort of the stable state of Sentient is this platform with thousands of very niche community-built, community-owned, and community-aligned models that outperform models built by closed companies in their respective domains. And again, I'll later in the presentation, I'm going to dive deeper on how this idea of openness can help us dominate the AI space in the long run. So this is the founding team. And the founding team is sort of the reason why I decided to join Sentient. Pramod Vishwanath, he's a professor of engineering at Princeton. And actually, his previous two startups ago, he founded a communication infrastructure company that ended up being a foundation for 4G. Sandeep is a pioneer in crypto. He's the founder of Polygon. And a bunch of other protocols in the crypto space. Himanshu, he's our sort of acting CEO, and I think one of the most brilliant founders that I've met. And Kenzie is a investor turned founder that works on the sort of ecosystem and business side. And then something that I really like is that we're a very research heavy company. And we have a really sort of deep and expansive teams of researchers, mostly from Princeton, but also from University of Illinois and some people from Columbia. Would love to see some people from University of Florida here as well in the future. And yeah, I think something that people like to talk about is the seed round that they managed to pull off in June. It was a sort of a PowerPoint unicorn. They raised 85 million at 1.2 billion valuation before product, before anything really. It was just a vague mission statement to bring ownership right guarantees to AI to make it more open and aligned. And yeah, the team was just, I guess these investors had very high conviction in the team. And to not delay anymore, starting with the actual presentation, the thesis behind Sentient is that incentive system in AI right now is terribly broken. First, AI has been historically researched and developed in the open for the last 3 or 4 decades, really. And it's only a recent phenomenon that you have these closed companies that took an incredible amount of knowledge from the public domain. They took it last mile, they implemented it, and then they closed it and monetized it. And the initial contributors are not rewarded in any way. So if you're an open source contributor, if you're a PhD student, a researcher, your incentives really come in the form of citations and GitHub stars. You publish a breakthrough paper because AI is so capital intensive, it's only going to get implemented by the biggest companies. They make billions of dollars indirectly because it improves their models. And in turn, you get academic clout that you then leverage to get a job in these same companies. And the solution to that would be open source, but open source suffers from a different problem, which is lack of ownership right guarantees. If you publish an open source model, you basically said goodbye to any sort of monetization guarantees, and I can just take your model, build on top of it, and you're never going to know that I'm using it. And this has been an emerging theme of research actually to how to solve for monetization of open source models. And I think existing companies and projects, their approach always sacrifices one of the two. It's because the nature of open source and monetization are almost mutually exclusive terms. And the only way to reconcile them, we believe, is through alignment. So what we're looking for in our main thread of research is this OML framework, which stands for Open, Monetizable, and Loyal Models. And in its ideal form, it's a way to embed loyalty into the models such that I can publish an open source model. You as an app builder, you have access to the weights, you can run this model locally, you can fine tune it, but the model won't respond to you unless it gets some sort of a secret key, a permission, activation phrase from me as a model owner. And then every query has to be routed through Sentient, and we can provide these ownership right guarantees. And then something very interesting happens. But the reason why this is important is that the current state of AI is that it's being developed behind closed doors without regulation. And sort of the grand narrative of AGI is that we're approaching a point of singularity potentially and achieving this super intelligence. And AI as a technology is quite unique, not only because it's the most disruptive and technology that humanity has ever came up with, but also it has a higher degree of agency than any other technology before it. So it's very likely that when we reach this point of AGI, of super intelligence, we won't be able to revert it. And our existence as humanity from that point onward is going to be defined by how well we align it to our values, to our collective values as of now. And that's why we believe that it's absolutely critical that AI is developed in the open, that it has inputs from the community, that it's not driven by just a small group of people and led by some altman, and sort of because you have these the biases of the model are defined by the people who build it, and you cannot not have biases. Every model is going to have biases. What we believe is that you need to empower the community to define what biases should be. So yeah, and as I said, the solution to all of this we believe is OML. We believe that there's the tension between open source and ownership rights can be reconciled, and that these models should be loyal to their communities, meaning that they're aligned to their granular sets of values. And then you get to this state where now when you solve for ownership right guarantees, these models become revenue generating assets. And that's where the blockchain sides come in. And I'm very much a crypto skeptic. I think 99% of the use cases for blockchain are vapor and just optics. But AI as a technology, I believe, has the strongest claim for decentralization of both governance, of ownership, than any other asset before it, just because it's so critical and so sort of game changing. And once you solve for monetization, these models become revenue generating assets, and they can be tokenized, and you can distribute this ownership based on contributions, and you can build this very complex incentive and coordination system on top of it, where people, developers, and even non-developers are incentivized to submit code, knowledge, data to improve existing models. And the ecosystem sort of enforces this iterative nature of collaboration, where I publish a model, you have access to some sort of domain specific data, you can fine tune my model, make it more performant for one specific use case, and now you get equity in the resulting model, and I retain equity because I provided the sort of the foundational model. And then someone else builds on top of you, and someone else builds on top of you, and now you have thousands of niche specific models from, I don't know, that like you can build a shipbuilding model that takes care of bureaucracy for shipbuilding companies. It gets implemented, it gets used by these companies, it generates revenue, and the revenue is distributed to equity holders. And in terms of AGI, this road is decentralized, transparent. We can sort of iteratively guide AI and build AGI that serves humanity. So that's the grand scheme of things. In terms of the current state of Sentient, I think these are the most interesting threads on the product side. We released the first community-built and community-owned model a couple months ago. We started by releasing a couple 8B models and then had community decide on the sort of the alignment and personality of the 70B model. The ownership has been distributed through a community campaign to 650,000 people. So which makes it the most distributed AI model in existence. And the idea with Adobe is that now it's guided and governed by the community. So we did this first step. We released this model out in the wild, and now it acts like its own living, breathing thing. The community decides on what the future iterations of the model are going to be, on what it's going to be fine-tuned for, and what the alignment is going to be, tone. And then we help run these data campaigns where we source data and help fine-tune the model. And then on the sort of the user-facing side, we built a Perplexity competitor-ish. We built our own search framework, which actually I'm going to talk about in the next slide, but it outperforms Perplexity Pro when used with DeepSeek on a lot of these major search benchmarks. And they're much harder to game than you can't basically overfit a search framework to a benchmark. And something that's really interesting to me about Sentient Chat is that we want to build it as a consolidation layer for intelligence, where anyone can plug actual agent, not just GPTs as is the case with ChatGPT, but we have, I believe, 40 agents in the pipeline right now that can perform various tasks. And eventually we're going to allow users to create workflows and put them in a room together. And these are agents from different projects, different protocols, and we're hoping to solve this problem of fragmentation in both AI and right now crypto, because it's a very easy niche to capture. And then Sentient Blockchain is there for tracking ownership rights, tracking revenue flows, and distributing rewards for contributions. Token it's a very powerful incentive tool, and I truly believe that if done right, it can do some amazing things. And on the research side, so we have, again, this OML thread that's continuous. It's a very deep research problem, and there's no set timeline for cracking this strong loyalty. But what we have right now is a fingerprinting library. And fingerprinting and watermarking has been around for a while, but it always came at a cost of significant model degradation. And we found a way to scale it. For Dobby, we injected 5,000 fingerprints without degrading the model in any way. And these fingerprints can be used to enforce licenses. They're a tool for verifying model identity and origin, where now, say you build a model and you attach some sort of a license to it, and Amazon decides to build a chatbot on your model and doesn't pay you, you have a way from a user's perspective to confirm that this is indeed your model and enforce a license. Then for Dobby, we've also built a model training pipeline that right now we're going to try to generalize and allow anyone to define and fine-tune these models on skills, knowledge, and alignment. And then, as I mentioned, there's Open Deep Search, which we just released a couple of weeks ago, which is I think quite an interesting search framework.
I think we have a question if you're open to it really quick.
Yes, definitely.
So how can you prevent?
Can you hear him?
How can you prevent a large company that has more access to expert researchers from just finding a way to remove the fingerprint?
Yeah, great question. So fingerprints are actually very persistent and hard to remove. First, they're persistent over fine-tuning, and basically the only way to delete these fingerprints is if you know what they are. And the way we do it is we distribute these fingerprints in secret. We take, out of 5,000 fingerprints, we took I think 4,000, and we distributed them to model owners. And now you have 600,000 people that can help enforce these ownership rights. And then we keep a batch of these fingerprints secret, and we have watcher nodes that query models around the web that check for model origin. So yeah, the short answer is that the only way to delete them is to know what they are, and we keep them a secret. And if you're going to fine tune it, they're quite persistent across fine tuning. There is some ways that you can make, basically the only way that these fingerprints work is if the model acts deterministically for this particular set of queries. And you can, in theory, fine tune a model so much that it stops giving you these deterministic answers. But at that point, you fine tuned it so much that you're not talking about the same model anymore. Like, it's not going to resemble in any way, shape, or form the initial model. And it's actually notoriously hard to do because at least the open source models right now are quite unstable. And yeah, there's all sorts of interesting stuff that happens once you like strongly fine tune a model. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Yeah,
So
okay, we're gonna come back to it, so you can keep going.
And another thing is just to mention is that because of the current state of AI, you only need to provide these guarantees. Say you have Amazon dedicates $1 billion to erase fingerprints from a certain model. You don't need to provide these guarantees indefinitely because of the current state of AI, because of how fast it's progressing. For a certain model, you only need to provide these guarantees for a few months at most. And in the future, hopefully, we find ways to enforce these guarantees for a longer period of time. So what fingerprinting is, it's basically a repurposed backdoor attack. This is just a diagram to illustrate how backdoor attacks work in image recognition models or in sort of classifiers. But you can do something very similar to LLMs, where, again, you inject a bunch of queries for which now a model acts deterministically. So it can be a set of 10 random words for a query and 10 specific random words for a response. And every time you input this, the model gives word for word the exact same response. And then this is a sort of a graph that this is more investor oriented, but I think it illustrates the potential for this community owned and open model development. So BitTensor is a very interesting experiment. It's a coordination network, also utilizing a token, and it has $5 billion market cap right now. But the problem with it is that it doesn't enforce ownership rights in any way. It just gives away this like tremendous amount of money to people, for people to build models, to host them, to run compute, and it doesn't have any actual utility or generates revenue. Then on sort of the separate end of the spectrum, you have OpenAI, which is incredibly powerful, incredibly useful, but unfortunately and ironically closed. And here you have other companies as well, such as Perplexity and Anthropic. And DeepSeek did something very remarkable. And I think the narrative around DeepSeek was China versus US. And that's what people fixated upon. But DeepSeek did something much more powerful, which is it made it clear that open source can compete with closed source in terms of AI. And if you look historically, open source has really dominated closed source over a long period of time. With operating systems, Microsoft had its run for maybe a decade. And now Linux has more than 70-80% of the market captured. And this is where we stand. DeepSeek is open in a sense that it's open weights, but still the training process isn't entirely clear. And it's not defined by the community. So a big problem, you said that DeepSeek is censored in your school, and maybe rightfully so, because you don't know what kind of biases it has. And these may be like very subtle biases that can define your behavior, the behavior of communities, especially for these critical use cases. What happens when you start integrating these models into governments, into when kids start interacting? Something very interesting to me in terms of alignment and use cases is education and healthcare, government education and healthcare. In education, more and more school districts are going to start incorporating AI into their curriculums. And I'm talking about elementary and high school. And for you as a parent, if your kid is going to interact with the model in an unsupervised way, you want to make sure that this model is aligned to your set of values, whatever they may be. And in healthcare, if you're interacting with the model as a patient, either directly or indirectly, you want to make sure that this model is not optimizing for the financial benefit of the hospital, of the insurance company, but for your health. And the only way to do it is for these models to be in some way open source and openly benchmarked. And yeah, in governments, I think it's pretty clear. Like there's more ways than one to sabotage a government or government agency by somehow making the model adversarial or less performant even. And then this is the ecosystem scheme for Sentient. We're very committed to this idea of community-built AI. We want to bootstrap the ecosystem, and that's why we have the research team, but hopefully a dominant bulk of the work will be done by the ecosystem and by the community. So our core products are models, and for building models, you need two things. You need data and compute, and some miscellaneous infra for some like specific use cases. And we've established this data consortium of right now, I believe 30 data partners, where we want to allow builders to create these modular data pipelines that are comprised of different projects and companies ranging from synthetic data generation, data aggregation, to data labeling, benchmarking, adversarial prompting, whatever you may need as a builder. And then there's also a bunch of compute providers from centralized like AWS and GCP to a bunch of decentralized compute providers as well. And these models, once built, they get fed and used by the agents, and these agents get integrated with Sentient Chat. And that's how we close this loop. And what's very interesting is that these two are quite complementary because AI builders make these niche specific models that are more performant for their specific use cases. Agents get built on them. Agents are more performant and have more utility. More useful agents get more users. You generate more user data. This user data is then used to improve these models, and you close this improvement loop. And yeah, so the first pillar of our ecosystem are existing projects and companies, but we want to foster this small builder community. We want as many independent builders to build models, to build agents, and we're, I think, aggressively committed to it, I would say. Actually, right now we have 2 concurrent hackathons happening. One at Princeton around building stuff that generates passive income, like content creation. And yeah, we're going to leave it to the builders. And then we have one at ETH Zurich around model building and improving the search framework. And this is a hackathon that we ran at the AGI house in SF. We built our own environment for running a werewolf game comprised of just entirely of agents. And we had builders build agents with different strategies. And it was actually a blast. We were running these games live on this big like screen, and the talent density was quite amazing as well. We had director of research from DeepMind was one of the participants. We had a bunch of senior NVIDIA folks. Yeah, overall a great event. And yes, besides that, we've also started the first phase of our builder program. We're going to give out $1 million in grants in the next couple months, really, to independent builders and small teams to build on our infra contribute to this. It's mainly focused on sentient chat, but if you're interested in model building, we're looking for teams to start building these models as well. We have about 10 teams, but they're mostly existing companies and projects. And this is a QR code for the Builder Program announcement if anyone is interested. Basically, yeah, with the TLDRs that we're looking for insanely talented and ambitious builders, and I'm sure that University of Florida has a bunch of these as well. And with that, yeah, thank you. And if there is any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Do you have any questions? I guess one from me would be, can you talk about like your experience transitioning from Princeton to working at Sentient and like how that experience was?
Yes. So I was actually preparing to do a seed round for my own startup. My former professor reached out to me. He was looking for engineers. I did computer science at Princeton. He was looking for engineers, and then somehow I ended up on the business development /strategy /ecosystem side. The transition was very interesting because startups are a very unstructured and wild environment. I think the biggest shock for me was how much responsibility you get immediately at a startup compared to like bigger companies. Previously, my plan was to either do my own startup or join Coinbase. And Coinbase is an incredible company to work at. But looking at my friends that are there, your responsibilities are much more clearly defined and limited, for better or worse. I'm not saying that like this is necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that early in your career, you want to maximize your growth. You want to optimize to learn as much as possible in the shortest amount of time. And so I think like if you're considering joining a startup, I would definitely encourage it, and I would go through sort of follow that path instead of the classic corporate one, solely because the rate of growth is much higher, and you can always transition to sort of the big tech or similar.
Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, you can come closer. The microphone's not great.
So I'm very interested in the philosophies of your CEOs. It seems like your company culture is a little bit different from what you're talking about. So you talk about a lot of like about growth and the pipeline of your companies, but it seems like your CEO is a very interesting person. So I have a few philosophical questions about your company culture. Is it okay? Or it's more about like alignment and identity of AIs?
Can you specify what?
Yes. Let me just say this. So the goal of AI can be very simple, right? Maybe it's just to grab this or grab that. The goals of humans are more complex, like fighting socialists, fighting liberals, fighting cancer, protecting secrets or Zionism or whatever. So I'm always very curious, what should we ultimate such a mission for AI? And the wise lady told me the other day that it could be just as humans, which is just to survive. Let's assume that the AI's mission is just a copy of humans, which is just to survive. And all this organization and endless debates over pleasure and pain and cause and rewards just to serve that purpose. My worry is that they will just keep reproducing themselves, reproduce, and eventually they become something like cancer. And if we use cells as a metaphor, and they will have no actual goals, and the only goal is just to generate it or reach there with a centralized mind and endless copies of physical bodies, speaking one language, having one mind, and with no individuality, no individual minds. So my question is that, should humans in general be like AI? Suppose someone had a great success at the age of 25. Should he just follow that trajectory, taking the same actions, repeating the same talking points for the rest of his life with his only mission just to scale and scale, even though it means that he has repeated, and will repeat himself in this life, his last life, every life before his last life, his next life, and every life after his next life. Even though it means that in the end of his next few lives, what waste there will be cancer. Or should that person do something less boring? For example, if he fought socialists so hard in his last life, maybe in this life he should marry a socialist. The second question is much simpler to answer. Let's just say that every career has its own art. If you are a dentist, you master the art of dentistry. If you are an architect, you master the art of stones. Since AI has the ability to clone all these arts, doesn't mean that those who master these arts in their own careers don't need to exist anymore. For example, AI should first eliminate those who can drive, next those who can make music and movies, next therapists, teachers, lawyers, and radio hosts. And it should continue to eliminate one art after another until no master of any sort of arts, or shall we say craftsman, is left, and all such arts shall be just tempered, and all their masters shall be forgotten. That's my question.
Yeah, okay. There's multiple parts of this question. I love the question, by the way, very poetically put. And this is something that I thought about a lot. And I see two parts of the question. The one is on the sort of the philosophy of AI and our approach to AI and what we think this should look like. And then the other one is more around meaning of life, I believe. So in terms of Sentient's approach and what we want to enable is we're not claiming to know what the future of what future models should look like. On the contrary, we're saying that not one entity or group of people should define what these models are aligned to and what they're optimized for and what they look like. We want to basically just create like an open platform where its community helps it grow and slowly guide it. And then on the other part of the question, you mentioned something about AI eliminating all these professions, and then like I think that your question is basically it can be reiterated as what the meaning of life is, and I think as far as AI eliminating professions goes, I don't think it's inherently a bad thing for AI to be able to make music, to drive, to do anything, because the meaning of creating music is not the output itself, it's the act of creation. So like even sure, yeah, like there's going to be a lot of AI generated music and images and art, and as a consumer of art, you can look at it, you can enjoy it, but as an artist, I think if you're doing art for this, like the sake of actually like having this picture, then you're doing something wrong. I think the meaning of doing things, it's the act of creation itself, and that's what fulfills you, because otherwise, yeah, this is a very philosophical discussion, but like the fact that all art and everything that we produce will perish eventually makes the actual output completely meaningless. Like there's no objective value long term of this output. It's the act of creation itself. Great question. I didn't expect a question like this.
That's a very good answer to a good question too. I just have one final question from me. So you talked earlier about like that singularity point, like where we have to get our values in order before we make a fully sentient AI, because that's what will determine its course over the rest of human existence or however long that may be. And because your models are open source and like open to the community, obviously there's a risk that people may have goals and values that don't support the values that maybe your company does. Do you guys have any like safeguards that you put in place to protect against that? And if so, how do you defend putting those safeguards in place against the idea that like, people should be able to train these models as they see fit to like support human values in general?
Yes, yes. And this is something that we heavily debate internally as well. So I are on the side of setting safeguards for everything that's explicitly dangerous. Like you don't want to make a LLM that can produce bioweapons efficiently. But when you start talking about like ideologies and what ideologies are dangerous and general censorship, it's a slippery slope. And I think that the least bad way that you can approach this is to let community decide. It's like the Twitter debate as well, like free speech debate. This is just an extension of it in some way. And something a very interesting way to think about models is that model building is just a consensus process. It's the biggest consensus in existence. It aggregates these very large language models basically aggregate all the opinions of the internet and find the mean. And you want to make this process as explicit as possible, where it's clear what the consensus is, and then you want to let community define it. And sure, I'm sure there's going to be some models that are actually dangerous, and even more models that people claim or groups of people claim are dangerous. But it is what it is. I think it's more a symptom of a flawed society than a flawed platform. Great question.
Yeah, no, I think that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for your time. This was very interesting. Really appreciate you talking to us at God knows whatever hour it is over there.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah,
and yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions. And we are continuously expanding, and we're the builder program. I think if I was interested in building a startup around AI, it's something that I would heavily consider as a student. And I think students are our main target group for this initial phase. So if you're interested, or if you know anyone that's interested, reach out, apply. Yeah, I would love to see more students in here.
awesome. Cool. All right. Well,
Awesome.
thank you again for your time.